So for those who do not know me, my name is Kate. I am the head of operations at the Equal Group. So the Equal Group are a data-driven equality, diversity and inclusion consultancy based in Birmingham. We like to work with forward-thinking companies and deliver consulting and tech solutions that delivers sustainable progress. So just a few housekeeping. The first one was that this is being recorded and you would be able to watch this on YouTube later on. And the second is that if you're not speaking, please stay on mute. You can unmute if you want to ask a question. Another thing is that this is a safe space. So one thing I think that we're good at the Equal Group is that we love to have authentic conversations and we want everyone to share their views. So feel comfortable to participate in as much or as little as you feel comfortable. Take breaks. This is a no judgment zone. Please be respectful of other people's views and feel free to use the chat if you don't want to unmute. So let's get right into it because I'm very excited about this topic. So we're aware that access to funding for Black-owned businesses remains the biggest barrier for progression. And I've got a few stats for you that I wanted to read because it really shocked me. So the first one is only 0.24% of the total venture capital funding invested in UK startups went to Black entrepreneurs. And further that, only 0.02% were assigned to Black female entrepreneurs. And to me, this is super shocking. Another one is while 79% of business leaders state racial equity as a top priority, only 1 in 10 management roles are held by Black, Asian, and minority ethnic individuals. So for Black entrepreneurs, funding is just one of the many barriers faced on this journey. And I'm excited about this topic today because we're going to delve into what needs to change in the finance sector to encourage more Black people into business. What more can we do to fully equip Black entrepreneurs to reach scale? And how do we change this stagnant dynamic? And now I would love to introduce my guest speakers. I'm super excited to hear from them. So the first we have is Rebekah Taitt, who is the Regional Development Director at Lloyds Banking Group. And we have Michael Adeniya, who is the Chief Operating Officer at the UK Black Business Show. So if you can, please, Rebekah, I'll start with you. If you could just introduce yourself and then also share like why you're so interested in this topic.
No, absolutely. Thank you, Kate. Good afternoon, everyone, or morning or evening, depending if you're watching it on the YouTube channel as well. So as Kate mentioned, I'm Rebekah Taitt, the Regional Development Director for Lloyds Bank, and I have over 10 years of experience in the banking sector, where the vast majority of my time has been looking after small to medium clients with a turnover of up to 100 million in turnover. So now I have the privilege on behalf of Lloyds Bank to represent the Midlands as we continue our strategy of helping Britain prosper. And my role includes working with public, private and third-party sectors to really collaborate and continue towards contributing in the SME market. So areas of focus could be sustainability. So how do we help our clients on the road to net zero? Skills and talent. So, supporting clients, attracting, developing and retaining key people in the business. And lastly, our spotlight on Black entrepreneurs, so inclusivity, ensuring that our clients and colleagues reflect the community that we serve. And I was really happy when the Equal Group asked me to join today's call. So firstly, a big thank you to you all. But I think for me, I love the spin on the future element, which I think personally is really integral to all the conversations we're having throughout Black History Month. And some of you may be aware of the report that Lloyds Bank has produced. It's called the Black British and Proud Report, conducted in 2001 and also 2022. And it's the first, most largest primary research data done focusing on Black entrepreneurs. And out of that report, we produced 10 recommendations, which we know finance entrepreneurship is central to all of that report. And I think it's important not just the banks continue to have this conversation, but government and other key figures and corporations too. So I'm really looking forward to today exploring some of those topics with you all and hopefully giving you my insight from sitting in a large financial institution.
Amazing. Thank you, Rebekah. Michael?
Hello, everyone. I'm Michael Adeniya, and I work for the UK Black Business Show and UK Black Business Week, which is Europe's largest gathering for the support of Black entrepreneurs, Black career professionals, and organizations striving to be allies to the Black community. I say it's the largest event of its kind in Europe. It's essentially been doubling year on year since Raphael Sofaluk founded it in 2017. It's actually taking place next week. So we've actually expanded it from being a show that brought together um, over 150 Black-owned businesses, corporate partners from the likes of Lloyds, as well as other financial institutions, tech companies, and so forth. And also Black career professionals that are also career climbers and those trying to move up in leadership positions as well. So the event next week, we're expecting just shy of 10,000 visitors to an event that Raphael founded in 2017 for what was 500 people in the room and I think 25 Black-owned businesses. So I think that we are seeing a real growth in entrepreneurship and in representation of the Black community across the business and enterprise space. And yeah, events like this afternoon, I think is absolutely brilliant. Just like Rebekah said, that focus on the futures is exactly why we do what we do at UK Black Business Show. Is what's our role, what's our mission and our responsibility in creating equitable futures for Black business owners and career professionals moving forward.
Thank you, Michael. I did want to say I actually had a stall at one of the UK Black Business shows, I think a couple of years ago, and it was amazing. It was super exhilarating, I think, for people to see my service and just the feedback that I was getting. The atmosphere was amazing. So yeah, I think you're doing amazing there.
Kate, you never told me this. I had
didn't
no
tell
idea.
you this. No, I didn't. No, I've seen you around.
Oh, that's brilliant.
Yeah, so actually, as a female, a Black female entrepreneur, I just knew that I wasn't going to waste my time with finding funding because I knew that people like me don't get it as easily as my white counterparts. And I guess that leads me on to my next question. Like, how does bias actually come in or show up in general with regards to finance and with regards to like pitching your idea?
Who do you want to go first? Do you want to go first, Rebekah?
I can definitely start to open this conversation, and it's really, I don't know if the word's upsetting, but it's disheartening to, especially for me sitting from my banking point of view, to hear you say that, Kate. I say that because I know it's true. You know, I'm not saying it because, you know, I'm trying to dispel any conversations around it. And I think for me, we hear the term bias thrown around quite a bit at the moment in corporations and media setting. And I'm just, you know, is it conscious? Is it unconscious? What type of bias is it? But for me, the issue is around the impact that bias can have, such as some of the stuff of the conversation of what you've just said, Kate. So that won't come up in any statistic that we'll try and research and find. But what we know is it's having an impact on people's confidence as well. I'm not an entrepreneur. So I can only bring this back to my own experience of, you know, potentially going for a job and sometimes wondering why haven't I got an interview, or my counterparts are progressing at double the rate that I am, or their salary seems to be more than mine, even though we're doing, you know, similar jobs. I sit around a table that might not look like me, and it's all on a similar vein. Bias makes it so much more difficult and challenging for people to be truly successful. So I guess the question is, so what do we do? You know, we know this, so what do we do? And I'm all here for education. I think education is integral, and we have definitely all been on a journey, I think, over the unfortunate death of George Floyd in the US. But I think a really key part around this bias now is around positive, tangible impact. You know, being really transparent and holding corporations, you know, accountable publicly to charters for etc. For example, just so that, you know, we can truly measure and eradicate some of these issues that we are seeing of, you know, some of the stats you also mentioned earlier, Kate, we start to make a change to some of those numbers.
Yeah. Michael?
Yeah, well, I mean, everything that you said there, Rebecca, and I love the fact that Kate, you're a black female entrepreneur as well as your role at the Equal Group. I'd love to learn more about that actually, because yeah, my background is, I'm an immigrant to the UK. My parents moved here when I was 18 months old, and similarly, so weirdly, I've got this weird dynamic. My dad, growing up, my dad was always kind of like the second in command in my house. So
Mm.
my mom was the entrepreneur. She also had a full-time job. They set up a business, a supermarket in New Cross in Southeast London, which my mum basically went to her brothers and sisters and her family to get the funding to buy that shop. So they similarly didn't think I'm going to go to the bank to get a loan. They never, I'm going to seek investors. That never came into their sort of ethos. They always thought that they'd have to bootstrap it. And I think that what organizations like Rebecca's bank are doing now is trying to encourage Black entrepreneurs and underrepresented business owners and those with business ideas in general to realize that you don't need to put all this weight on yourself to grow these business visions and business ideas. So I like to think about, well, what is bias, first of all? And for me, the way I define it is really it's your brain creating a cognitive shortcut for you. So I might be let's use that job interview as an example. I know I had bias when interviewing so many people for roles over the last 10, 15 years. My background is playing professional sport. So as a professional sports person, I've always been in a sort of highly charged sort of environment where the faster, the bigger, the better you are. That's always been linked to a better performance. And there's often I often believe that people that have a sporting background like me, they might also be really good at sales. So when I worked in that commercial environment, I always kind of had a stronger affinity to people that may have a sporting background like myself, and predominantly that would have been men as well. So I always kind of, if I was looking at CVs or I was in an interview, you know bias showed up within me that, oh well, if someone has played sport, was the captain of their rugby team or hockey team, or whatever it might be, I felt, they might be good at sales like me as well. So once I started realizing that, what, bias can show up in me and show up in so many places, then it gave me an opportunity to think about, what do I need to do in order to park that bias at the door before I'm in this scenario. Um, and it takes really almost saying it out loud, like you're saying in your head that this is, your bias should not affect your decision moving forward. And I think now that, I'll be interested to know the people that are dialed in today, whether there's people from an HR background or learning and development backgrounds and so forth, that are now using things like scorecards when doing interviews and so forth, that actually allow you to measure each individual in a interview scenario equally. And I think that also applies in a pitching scenario when an organization is trying to get funding. That need to create shortcuts when there's a lot of money at stake, you're very time poor, your brain is naturally going to help you make faster decisions as to, does this business deserve 100K of my funding, or does this business deserve 100K of my funding? How am I going to make that decision, an accurate decision, as quickly as possible? And it doesn't always come down to science. And that's unfortunately where bias comes in. So we're encouraging a lot of investors now to think about that, to make sure there's a diverse group of people at that at that pitch table that is receiving that pitch, that are not always people that look like you and think like you. And also to consider, well, what are the scorecards and criterion that you want to write down and measure against, so that you're also considering what bias, how is your bias playing a role in your decision making.
Amazing. Rebecca?
Can I? Sorry, I was going to put my hand up as an emoji, and then I realised I'm supposed to be a part of this session as well. So, I've got a question. I've got a question,
Yeah, go for
Mike.
it.
Is that okay? I think it could be a question that we can be also explored in the chat as well by some of the guys dialing in today. But I think it's really interesting what you've said, and I've heard a lot of people come to me and say, Rebecca, what are your thoughts then on blind interviews? We don't know who's turning up, and I know what my thoughts are around that, and of course it's in line with that conversation around bias. So it'll be great if in the chat we could maybe get people's thoughts on that. What do they think to the process of blind interviews? Do we think that will support some of the biases that we see around the pitching table, for example?
Yes, feel free to enter your thoughts and views on that, blind CVs. So I guess, oh, Michael, did you want to add something?
I think it's a great group question. Yeah, definitely to get it in the chat there. And so I speak with a number of large corporates, and I'm sure Kate, Rebecca, you do as well, that some are using blind interviews as part of their recruiting process, and some are not. I think that ultimately, I like the idea of being aware of your bias rather than imagining that everyone is homogenous. That's just my own personal opinion. And if you're aware of your biases, then you can actually look at what is an equitable way to make a difference in that scenario, such as, I've even conducted an interview recently where I wanted to make sure that that it wasn't an all-male panel that was interviewing a candidate. Because I knew it was a female that we would be interviewing, so I had to ensure that that wasn't the case. So yeah, I think that I'd be interested to know what people in the group on the call are thinking, and also I'm really interested in what backgrounds everyone is from as well. Yeah, so if you want to drop in the chat, your company and your job role, I'd love to learn more.
Yeah, so I actually want to read out what Amechi has written here. So blind CVs do help within the context of recognizing natural bias. However, this needs to run all the way through the process and the organization. Very good point. And yes, please do add in your name and where you are, which company you're working from. I'm going to read out Charlotte's message, actually. It feels like it would save time and money for sure, but it feels like there could be potential for the buyers to turn up without having the time and presence of mind to pause and do the work to make sure it doesn't factor into your decision on the day. Think it would need to be a rigid process. I hear that.
Yeah, and a number of recruiters say that it's a slower process when you try to apply a scorecard, or when you try to apply more inclusive approaches to collecting CVs, that it does become a slower process. So I think there's a payoff that ultimately, what do you want more? Do you want innovation, growth? A diverse range of opinions at the table that can spark a change within your organization and set your organization to win? Or do we only want to make the quickest decisions as well? I think that through my career, I've always been in environments, again, and it's partly because of my sporting background, that speed is best. Like, let's try and make a decision as quickly as possible, because if you're not first, you're last, that sort of language. But I'm beginning to realize over the last few years, that it's sometimes, if you're building something to last, then maybe taking the time to be intentional about some of these processes is really important.
In bank, we would say not just putting a plaster over it, right? Because the plaster's going to fall off in the end. Let's really get to the crux of it and the root cause, and fix it for the long term.
Absolutely. Okay, I'm going to move to the next question because we've got loads to cover. So my next question is, it's around like education and entrepreneurship, and I think there's a perception of Black-owned businesses to be just not as good. So is that perception true? And if so, what tools and resources are needed for Black-owned businesses to progress? Becca?
Okay, no, absolutely. I can start the conversation off here. So, to your first point, it is absolutely not true. You know, I don't think I need to say that. Hopefully, that everybody on the call today realizes is that too. However, what we do see is a significant difference if I just bring it back to financial terms in the turnover of some of our Black entrepreneur businesses versus others. Um, so I'm just going to take us a little story, and I do appreciate that I am coming from this from a corporate angle rather than being an entrepreneur, but that is still really important. It's important for me to not acknowledge, but there's still some really important reflections for me here to make. We went to the Black Business Show in May, which was a great show, and I was really excited with my counterparts to sit around that table. There was MPs, there was councillors, there was really good figureheads, and I was really proud as somebody also from Birmingham and from the Black community to be sitting around that table. And I was ready for my moment. I was ready to share with everybody what Lloyds Bank was doing to support Black entrepreneurs. And it was really positively received around the table. However, the key takeaway for me was, well, why don't we know about any of this? You're saying you're doing all this stuff, but we don't know about, you know, some of the great stuff that, for example, the bank is doing. And that was a really point of reflection for me, because whilst I do believe there are some great resources and tools out there to support Black entrepreneurs, I think there's a real big gap around the accessibility to that. And sometimes it being in a simple manner. I appreciate that everybody's really busy in today's world, and you will have to go to X or Y or Z, or even in my case in the banking industry, sometimes, you know, the terminology that can be used, you know, just isn't easily processed. So I think for me personally, whilst I think there could be some more direct and tangible resources out there, I think there are some good stuff in the market space. It's more around the accessibility to those resources. And Mike, please do challenge me from the other aspect, I guess, of those receiving it, how it feels.
Yeah, I think that it's a case that absolutely education is needed, but it's a case of where do we need to target that. From my experience and from some research has been done that the Black community are not bad at launching businesses. In fact, we're very, very good at launching businesses. Like, as a Nigerian, that term "do it now" is a case of just go out there and go and do it. So, but where a number of businesses of all backgrounds have a challenge is, are they going to stay trading for 24 months or longer? So you can come up with a brilliant idea, and you know, in any economic environment, especially the one that we're in right now, is how do we ensure that we equip and empower business owners in order to not just launch that business, but also keep that business trading and afloat and innovative for years to come. 68% of the audience at UK Black Business Week are Black women. So we are seeing a huge rise in Black female entrepreneurs. I don't have any empirical data on on how many, on what the ratio is of Black female entrepreneurs versus other demographics. I know in the US they're starting to collect some data around that, and they're seeing a huge rise as well. So we're really encouraged into, well, firstly, understanding why that is, And it may be because of particular lifestyle. If you're responsible for, if women are taking a vast majority of the responsibility for childcare, then having a side hustle or being self-employed might be provide a little bit more flexibility. And also we see that as a community that there's a lot of areas in which the products and services specific for us, we can't find them in the stores and in the shops that we want them, whether it's for us, our children, our families. So we are seeing this growth in entrepreneurship. So how do we equip entrepreneurs to be able to do that in the short term, medium term, and long term? And that might be around skills of ensuring that there's a good understanding of the fact that cash flow is king. Making revenue numbers and so forth, and a lot of businesses get excited about what happens around social media and encouragement from their networks and their friends. But getting the really core skills of managing that cash flow, the digital skills that are needed, long-term planning and business planning, having that business plan that you can actually effectively pitch your business and pitch your vision to for loans and for various grants and various routes for growth are really, really important. And that's what UK Black Business Show, the Birmingham Black Business Show as well, that's what it's really all about, is how do we make sure that we can help organizations like Rebekah's and other institutions out there that actually have a really wide range of educational tools and resources. If you've heard of Small Business Britain, absolutely a wealth of free resources for those that want to develop, grow, and scale their business, but ensuring that actually it's being communicated to those that really could benefit from those resources as well. Because finance is only one of the barriers to growth for diverse businesses. Access to the right networks and the tools and education is really the other one.
Thank you. So we may have like a few companies on the line, on the webinar, a few corporates, businesses who they may not be entrepreneurs themselves, but they want to understand how they can help in this. And I think the answer could be supplier diversity. So my question is, why is it necessary for companies to have supplier diversity?
You going first, Rebekah?
I was going to let you go first, Mike.
Yeah, sure. Supplier diversity is really it's really needed right now. We're seeing corporates are now looking at the organizations they've been giving large contracts to and small contracts to, that they've actually realized, what, we're actually not distributing these in an equitable way. We're seeing it right from the top at government level. We heard about it a lot through the pandemic of how again, because of the need for sometimes a faster decision versus the most sustainable and responsible decision, that contracts are not sometimes being issued in the right sort of way. And then on the flip side as well, if you are trying to build your business quickly, if you are trying to identify the lowest hanging fruit, then sometimes, and we even do this at UK Black Business Show as well, you may not be looking to get your business set up in the right sort of way that you can apply for some of the more larger contracts. And engaging with large corporates like the American Expresses and MasterCard and so forth, they have a really complex supplier procurement system that it can be really easy to be turned off at the start to applying for that. And there could be so many reasons that could be just from a being equipped to have your simple things like your VAT registrations and being able to provide a number of financial details, but also being able to also justify and explain your own sustainability strategy, which is also something that some suppliers even ask for now. and just being able to allocate the time to go through what might take a process of, some of these processes can take multiple hours to complete, just in order to get your foot at the table. So I know on both sides that there's some education need to be done, and I know there's a number of organizations out there that are working with corporates who have identified that they've got an issue here, and the various organizations at different scales along their journey, the likes of JP Morgan, they've allocated 700 million pounds that they want to allocate to black owned businesses. And yeah, I can see the likes of, I can see Drew Curry's on the line here. I know he knows some great information around how corporates are now looking at how they redistribute their corporate contracts. And it's not a new thing in terms of supply diversity. This has been existing in the US since the 60s in order to encourage a range of minorities to be at the table for opportunities like this.
Thanks, Mike. I think the part I would home in on and everything you said there, which I thought was brilliantly summarised, was around the education piece. I mean, particularly myself in the new role that I'm doing. You know, that whole being ready sometimes for a larger corporation and the process that you're going to go through as part of that supply chain. You know, there's a number of barriers that has to go through, or requirements, and I think that education piece, but supporting on the journey, I think there's also an onerous back on the corporations around making that journey a lot more accessible and simplified, a bit to what we were saying previously as well. So absolutely, I think supply diversity is fundamental. I think for this as well, maybe another question for the chat is around the charters. You know, as you said, in America, there's some really good quotas and data around, you know, the investment that's been going into this. But I believe it needs to be a transparent process as well. So yeah, and I think we've learned, bringing it closer to home in Birmingham with, you know, the Commonwealth Games, and, you know, some of the hit back around the supplier diversity there as well, and, you know, just making it more accessible and a easier journey for the likes of black businesses to go on to. So yeah, I think it's integral, and there's a lot more work and focus that needs to be done in this space.
Yeah, I think what you said there is I think it's really important to recognize that it's a huge opportunity. Right now, we are going through a really tough economic transformation, that out of anything like this, that opportunities are being created. I used to actually collect all of the different, I used to have a spreadsheet. I was collecting all the information of organizations that are allocating millions of pounds for to black-owned businesses, to minority-led businesses, and so forth. The UK economy is going on a journey right now where it will need diverse and sustainable businesses in order to regrow and sustain to last. And that's the change that I'd love to see. That but in order to do that, you know, we have to ensure that the buyers and sellers are meeting. And Drew, thank you for dropping in the chat there that, you know, subscribing to things like the MSD UK's network there. I think it's like a £300 fee, but you get access to see all of the different organizations that you might well have a service, whether you're a small consultant, whether, you know, you've got a product that you're looking to offer. There are probably contracts out there that your business is applicable for. And it's great to recognize that organizations know that this impacts their bottom line if they do not have diverse suppliers going into their pipeline. Because you know, the Commonwealth Games is a great example. If your community isn't being represented in the build up of a product, and then why should they be engaged in the delivery of that product or service as well? And we even see it here. You know, part of my role is working for a large exhibition and events company, and even those that have no engagement with the event at all, whether they're in finance, or they may well be even in the the sort of the different ancillary services that set up our office and our business. They may never go on site to an event at all. They want to see representation on the stage at our conferences because they want to be a part of something that looks and feels like them and represents the communities that they're from. So I know that it's a long journey that we're going on, but I'm really encouraged by a lot of the change and a lot of the statements that have been made. And like Rebecca said, the murder of George Floyd was a huge change in that. Uh, and I'm encouraged by the fact that we can actually come together as communities to turn something positive out of that tragic death.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions? If you do, please feel free to put them in the chat. I've got one last question, and then I'm going to read out the questions that are posted in the chat. So my last question is around data, and how important data is in diversity of entrepreneurs. So I'm going to start with you, Rebecca.
Absolutely. And I've got down here, I know that Mike said earlier on, I think you said, Mike, we weren't too sure around how many Black female entrepreneurs that we have, and that is the issue, right, around this data. So, data is fundamental to this conversation, and I know the Equal Group use data at the core of your conversations that you have to have a direct positive impact. And at the moment, we don't have the data, is the honest truth, and that's causing all kinds of problems. As without the data, you can't only influence, but you can't change, you can't measure or target the change. You don't understand, where are we as a baseline, and I don't know in what other principle we would apply that same information to. We always would understand first our data and go off the back of it. So as a bank, I mentioned earlier around the Black British in Proud report, that is one of our core recommendations of the 10 to the program. And this isn't just for it's for all the sectors. It's a problem for in this case the UK. And I think I remember a few months ago, I was doing a presentation and I went online and I was trying to Google some stats, Black entrepreneurs, this. And I think I came up, Kate, with the three that maybe you mentioned a little bit earlier on around VC, that there's just no others for us to use. We truly don't understand, our landscape. It will always come up with, elements of minority statistics, but never anything purely around, Black entrepreneurs, and there in itself lies a problem. So I think we will hear more conversations around the importance of data moving forward to drive better outcomes. And Mike, tell me if I'm wrong, but I believe there was some conversations with government potentially around this, and actually how we drive, through government, to understand the landscape of collecting and holding that data.
Yeah, you're right. So I know there's an all-party parliamentary group that is actively looking at the fact that if you launch a business and you register your business at Companies House, you're not asked what ethnic minority you're from when setting that business up. You provide your name, your postcode, and so forth, and your business name. But if that was a simple change that could be done when registering at Companies House, then that information would actually allow us to learn a lot more about, well, the businesses that are contributing to the UK economy, who runs them, who owns them, where do they come from. It gives us a lot more information to know about. I like to look at it from a positive perspective of what contribution we're making as a Black community to the UK economy. I've had the privilege of hearing speakers such as Akala and interviewing people like David Olusoga, who are incredible historians. And every time I engage with them, it just reminds me of the fact that we have every right to have a seat at the table in this country. That it's not a case that the narrative that that I've sat with for many moments in my life of that we don't belong here. We have been part of the UK for hundreds, almost thousands of years. And therefore, when it comes to recognizing our value and our contribution to this economy, we should really be looking at how we measure that. So UK Black Business Show, we're changing how we collect our data so that that businesses, when they inquire, or when they exhibit at the show, we start to get an understanding. How many people do you employ? What kind of revenue are you generating, and what are your goals moving forward? Because then if we start to be able to collect that just from our attendees and our exhibitors and so forth, we'll actually be able to say, this is the contribution that just this portion is making. And I think that it'd be great to show that to the government, but I think it's also really important to acknowledge that for ourselves, that we are really strong, significant contributors to the UK economy.
Amazing, thank you. So I don't think there are any questions in the chat, but I did want to highlight some of the comments that were made. So thank you so much to Drew Curry, who's added a few links and some comments about just initiatives that are out there for underrepresented entrepreneurs. So I think we should copy that and send that out. So I'm going to ask the team to do that because I think these are really useful. I did want to touch on Charlotte's comment about there's a huge lack of external/advertised support, which we talked about, when it comes to a lot of companies that provide funding/support for Black entrepreneurs. These things seem to be kept internal and close to the chest. It has to be searched for rather than being celebrated outwardly and promoted. 100% agree with that. And Amechi has mentioned getting started and keeping going are major challenges for businesses. UK small business advisory support has been diverse and fragmented for decades, making it hard to find one source of information. Absolutely.
Yeah, just on the point from Charlotte there, I think that's a really valid point. Like I hear a lot through the grapevine of there's this grant. Obviously Drew's posted in there about what Sainsbury's are doing with Foundervine, which is brilliant. There's such a massive lack of representation on the shelves in. I think Tesco said that they've got 3 Black-owned products on the shelves in Tesco's. Which they're obviously massively embarrassed about. However, I think that there is so much that is happening out there to try and change, but it would be so good if there was a really nice way to be able to see that. And you're right, I think advertising is just one of the ways to do it. Taking part in the UK Black Business Show is a great way, and we're seeing more and more organizations support the event for that specific reason, so they can communicate in a targeted way. But it'd be brilliant if a show like ours wasn't needed. People often talk about, well, as you try and climb up the ladder, you should be helping yourself. You should be making yourself redundant. It's almost the same way in as far as our organization is concerned as well. Is how great would it be if there was great representation, that we all knew about the different opportunities and we're getting equitable opportunities to get those funding and grant opportunities and so forth. So the more that can be done by those organizations to communicate outwardly, and I think there's a certain nervousness about outward external communication that comes from them. And we see that when you go big and just be unapologetic in supporting a particular community, they get behind you. With like what Stormzy is doing with HSBC around education, in terms of books and Oxford University grants and so forth. It's absolutely amazing. So sometimes it's just go loud, go big, make it really, really well known, and the community will often get behind you.
I think also, Mike, there's an element of immersing yourself within the community as well. So at times where we do see some great branding or announcements, it's just not to the right audience. And I think getting yourself immersed within the community, whether that's having, you know, ambassadors or influencers, as you mentioned, like Stormzy for HSBC, to make it relatable. I think that's also a real big learn for some of the corporate organisations as well.
Completely agree. So I'm going to ask for this question. Okay, just going to mention this comment. So Black businesses are also going through different routes. For example, the Black-owned enterprise and similar groups are thriving on Facebook and Instagram. The Black Pound report is starting to shift attitudes. Absolutely. Thank you. So we just
Yeah,
had
with the
oh, go for
Black-owned
it.
enterprise, we use it a lot, and sometimes just even in a conversation when someone says, "I'm looking for a plumber," like, go there and use that as a resource to find a Black-owned plumber. You can, encourage your friends, your non-Black friends, to use resources like that. And if you got a I like to look at, what circle of influence I have, and I've got the ability now to have an influence across a number of different business units here that are thinking, I'm looking for diverse suppliers for our events or for whatever it might be, and we can actively use our voice to drive people towards those different Black-owned opportunities. So yeah, I think that there's so many groups out there that we can properly leverage and drive everyone towards to support.
Yeah. So we just have a quick poll, if the team can launch that poll. And whilst they're doing that, it would be great to just have your closing remarks, Rebecca and Michael. Anyone can go first.
I'll just jump in really quickly. Thank you for inviting me to join in this webinar, and thank you to everyone that's been listening as well. I think I mentioned that UK Black Business Week is next week, and we've got 14 events across 6 days. I'm not sure where everyone's based. I think I've got a feeling that everyone's based all over the UK. Like I live in South Wales, but most of the events in UK Black Business Week are in London. They're across 2 anchor venues. And for dialing in today, I'll be more than happy to invite all of you as guests to any events across the week. So please feel free to visit ukblackbusinessweek.com, and you can use the code. Let me just get what the code is. I think it was TEG50. So TEG for the equal group, TEG50. And if you apply that code at the checkout, that will give you a free ticket to a weekly pass to attend any event across the course of the week. Or if there's only a particular day that you can come down, you can just book a ticket for that event as well. But that should give you a free ticket to UK Black Business Week.
That's
And hope to see
amazing.
you there.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Michael. Super appreciate that. And Rebecca, closing remarks?
No, absolutely, Kate. And I will also be at the Black Business Show, so I'm really looking to coming along. I've really enjoyed today's conversation, and I think there's been some really great audience participants, which always brings these calls alive. So thank you. And I think it's given me some food for thought as well to reflect on. And the truth is, I think we have to get better at working together and collaborating with key organisations like yourself at the Eagle Group and the Black Business Show. But the future is bright. You know, we are continuing to have great positive conversations like today on how we can make a positive change for the future, but we have to keep these conversations going to ensure that there is really tangible reform, to make sure we have a truly inclusive environment for the future entrepreneurs out there. So yeah, just a big thank you really from me, Kate.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much to our guest speakers, Michael and Rebecca. Super appreciate you. And it's been a great conversation. Please do feel free to leave any of your details in the chat if anyone wants to reach out to you directly. And thank you to you all on the webinar for joining. Our details, the Eagle Group, will be in the chat as well. And we really hope to see you at our next webinar, which is next Wednesday, 12 to 1 p.m. And that's going to be on Black women in leadership. Super exciting. But yes, thank you to everyone joining, and hopefully see you soon.
Thank you, Kate.
Thank
Good to see you, Rebecca.
Thank you all for joining.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.
Take care. Bye.